Hello and welcome. We'll get started in just a moment, but while we're waiting, we'd love for you to quickly answer the question found by clicking on polls in the bottom right corner. It should be live now. See the answers rolling in. Oh no, we put the fun and dysfunction as leading the pack here.
I love it.
All right, well, we've officially tipped past 1 o'clock. So as others join us, we're going to get started so that we have plenty of time to get through all of our content today. So again, hello and welcome to today's Quick Byte webinar, Is Your Board on Board? Strengthening Fundraising Through Better Board Alignment. We're excited that you're here as we learn and gain insight from the expertise of our panelists, three leaders in the nonprofit space that you see on your screen who know a thing or two about working with and motivating boards and nonprofit teams. My name is Kristen Serrano. I'm the Managing Director for Animal Care at TrueSense, and I'll be moderating today's panel. And with that, it's time to meet our wonderful panelists who will each introduce themselves. Lisa, if you could kick things off, followed by Calvin and then Matt.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Lisa Supernant. I'm the CEO at Ronald McDonald House Charities in Tampa Bay. And when a child has to travel away from home for specialized life-saving medical treatment, we provide essential services, including lodging, meals, and support, reducing their burden and allowing them access to health care. So I've served on several boards myself, but my primary experience comes from leading our organization's board for the last 7 years. Looking forward to the conversation.
Hello, my name is Calvin Moore. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at MetroCrest Services in Carrollton, Texas, where MetroCrest Services really works with the community to help individuals and families really chart out a path for themselves and for their families to attain self-sufficiency. And my career first started off as a development professional, so I kind of cut my teeth in major gifts, direct response campaigns, plan giving, and so forth. And I've kind of maintained my certifications and maintained my applications through my various job responsibilities, and made sure that I still participate at the strategic level for fundraising for all organizations for which I'm part of the staff. So happy to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Calvin. My name is Matt Monberg, and I am the Senior Vice President of Integrated Strategy and Insights here at TrueSense. In my career, I have been a nonprofit executive reporting to boards, and I have also been on boards having executive directors report to me. So I have experience on both sides and very excited to share that with our audience today.
Got to get in the habit of muting and unmuting. Sorry, y'all. Thank you guys for being with us today. We're super excited to benefit from your combined experience. So let's dive in with a question that I would love for each of you to answer. What does it look and feel like when a board is truly on board with a fundraising program? Let's follow the same order as our introductions, hearing from Lisa, then Calvin, and then Matt.
I think when your board is on board, they are leading themselves through fundraising, right? So my biggest practical advice is to find your champions on your board so they can do that. So whether it be people in your development committee, your board chair, these are the people that are going to work with your staff team, create that strategy. They're going to come back to the board, help them leverage each other and their connections, and celebrate those wins. It's great when I call the board, but when the board member can call another board member and say, wow, that was an amazing connection you made, that is just a really strong way for your board to be on board.
Outstanding question and outstanding first answer. Thank you. From my perspective, and trustees are genuinely on board with fundraising, you see active engagement, shared investment in and ownership of outcomes, and a clear alignment with the organization's mission. Board member giving is routinely scrutinized by major donors and foundations and corporations when making funding decisions. So it's critical that board members make personal, meaningful gifts that really inspire donor confidence and demonstrate leadership. And then there's a visible commitment. Trustees open doors, they champion the organization within their own networks, and then they attend selective donor meetings and help steward relationships. And the board, along with the CEO, they have to set the tone culturally. And what I mean by this is philanthropy has to be viewed as a collective responsibility, not simply a staff assignment. In consultation with the CEO and or the development committee, the board really should set benchmarks for involvement, help celebrate wins, and then guide strategic focus and keep strategic focus on revenue.
Thanks, Calvin. Not much left to say because so much of that is covered in my own experience. But to me, here's the clearest sign is that fundraising feels energizing to everybody that is involved. A lot of times fundraising can feel like a have to. And when everybody is on board, from the board all the way down to the staff, really understanding that fundraising is how you fuel impact, it is mission critical. It has an energizing effect because then the board knows that the staff is for them and the board is for the staff. And there's this wonderful synergy in the middle. And Calvin mentioned culture, which is critically important because fundraising is about shared leadership, not a staff function. And when it's happening naturally and on board, it's just an easier, more culturally relevant and unifying conversation. And that's how you're going to know that your board is on board with your fundraising program.
Great opening thoughts from all three of you all. Got our brains warmed up and activated. So we're going to stick with Matt for this second question. What's the biggest misconception that you've seen nonprofit boards have about fundraising?
I'm off mute now, right? Okay, good. Recently, I was on a plane and I was sitting next to someone who worked for a bank, and he was proud to tell me that he had just joined a board of a local organization here. And what was interesting was that he started to go through all of the misconceptions that I feel that board members have. So one is that fundraising is some kind of like quick fix, easy to do sort of thing. Like, well, just get on social media more. We need Instagram. Or a couple of years ago, it was like, how can we figure out a viral ice bucket challenge, right? Well, then I started to turn the questions back around on this guy. Well, he had all of this data about how they do marketing in their job, right? He knew the cost to acquire a customer, what their retention rate was, what their ROI by channel was, and this was all for bank customers, people that were going to open accounts there. And that's really when it hit me, is that he was speaking the language of his profession that he knew, one that was built on a whole lot of expertise. And board members are accomplished people who have built successful careers on their own, but professional fundraising and nonprofit management and nonprofit accounting, these are typically not part of that background. These are things they have to learn. And they're on board and on the board because they have a heart for the mission, not because they're fundraising experts. And that's really how it should be. So the misconception is that there's going to be a perfect fit between what they bring to the board that you want and how you run a strong nonprofit organization. And so when you can address that misconception, it's okay for them to come. And the onus is really on the organization to provide the education and the onboarding to close that knowledge gap so that they feel comfortable contributing their expertise in those areas where they might have misconception, because professional fundraising is likely something that they haven't had experience with, but data is probably something they do within their own field. And bringing those together is critically important.
Really important nuances there between the marriage of passion and education in the nonprofit space. And we're going to dig into that a little deeper as we go through the next several questions here. So now we're going to shift to one of our favorite topics in direct response fundraising, which is return on investment, or ROI. Calvin, can you share your thoughts on the value to a nonprofit when its board understands balancing short-term ROI versus long-term donor value?
Yes, I can. And I think it's one of the most critical functions of CEO and development teams to really educate the board on these particular issues. I think when a nonprofit board understands how to balance short-term ROI with long-term donor value, that it really empowers the organization to make smarter, more sustainable decisions that serve both immediate needs and the future mission impact. And that's the key statement to remember. There are certainly key benefits to the nonprofit for boards to increase their understanding and their long-term expectations for growth. And one of them is sustainable revenue growth, right? So prioritizing long-term donor value really ensures that investments in cultivation, stewardship, donor experience, they really yield recurring and increasing support over time. Reducing dependence on costly donor acquisition efforts is extraordinarily important, but keeping the focus on the long game is even more important. The next one is effective resource allocation. So, knowledge of donor lifetime value helps boards justify upfront costs and investments, like major gift programs or donor engagement tools. It may seem like it may not show immediate returns, but building capacity for future growth and resilience is super, super important. And then I think maintaining strong donor relationships, where we are in the relationship game, right? And so a balanced perspective really encourages intentional stewardship and I think it results in higher donor retention rates and deeper supporter relationships, which are often proven to be more cost effective and impactful, than focusing solely on bringing in new donors. Acquisition is super important, but maintaining those relationships are even more important. And then there's mission advancement. Board can really confidently support strategies that really strengthen long-term mission impact. If boards understand nothing else, they understand how crucial long-term missional impact is and how important being able to scale to impact is. I once heard a friend of mine say that there's no, and you've probably heard it said before, that when there's no money, there's no mission. So we've got to keep the main thing the main thing. And this really helps us to focus on engagement campaigns for advocacy work. Even if they don't yield quick financial results, they really lay the foundation for future success. And then the boards have to really engage in strategic decision making when it relates to development. And I think by understanding and tracking both ROI and lifetime value, boards can move from reactive to short-term thinking to proactive strategic leadership that positions the organization, the nonprofit, for lasting success. And ultimately, a board that recognizes the importance of developing donor relationships for long term value, they really make decisions that increase financial sustainability and deepen programmatic impact, ensuring that the organization thrives well into the future.
Thanks, Kevin. That was a lot of really great nuggets, but I'm going to zero in on one that you mentioned twice here, which was donor acquisition, because that teed up our next question, and Lisa perfectly. So we're going to take a little bit of a different spin as well. We've been talking about the perspective of the board and their thought process. Now we're going to shift to talking a little bit about the development team and the role that they play. So acquisition, Calvin, as you mentioned, is sometimes one of the hardest conversations that we have to have between development team members and the board, and the investment in it. So Lisa, what guidance do you have for development staff in making the case for the board to invest in acquisition?
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. So I just want to say, wherever you are in this process right now, I have been there with you. So we actually made the case for acquisition for multiple years and did not break through, and really had to step back and say, okay, what is the situation here? Why do we need acquisition? So we were actually looking long-term and looking at that we were going to go into a capital campaign. The board had agreed that at this future, we were going to go into a capital campaign, and our chief development officer and I sat down and we said, okay, what does this look like? What does success really look like? And so we kind of created a gap analysis of where we were at that moment versus where we needed to be successful. So we tied into that strategic plan. But then we had to take it to the board. So I guess one of the things I want to say is you also have to do a gap analysis of your board. The biggest failures I've ever seen in myself and with other boards is if you come at your board too strong and too hard before they're ready and they have the information they need. So I always say, be a politician, right? We're going to build from the grassroots up. So in our case, our example is what we did is we had this gap analysis, but we said, we've got to get the board in a different mindset. How are we going to do that? So first we chatted with the board chair and some external stakeholders. We presented our case and kind of got out some of the kinks, right? What were their questions they wanted answered and how do we move this forward? And then we realized that there was still a little bit of a mindset of scarcity. I don't know how many of you experience that with your boards, but they want to save money first, like that's the first way. So we showed them actually the TED Talk, Dan Paletta, the way we think about charity is dead wrong. And if you haven't seen it, watch it. And went to have this discussion with them about the difference between a scarcity mindset and an abundance mindset, and that we can move to an abundance. And we answered those questions. And then after they were in that frame of mind, we set up another appointment. We presented to them this plan. And again, just to executive committee. We said, can we get your buy-in? What do you think? Where are the holes here? They gave us feedback. We met with them again. We re-presented with their feedback, answered your questions. And then I will say this so many times today, they became our advocates. Myself and our CDO can go to the board every day and say, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this. But when we have gathered the executive committee together, we have gotten them on the same page, and they go to the board and say, we're behind this, we need to do this, we did it. And so not only did we bring on TrueSense, but we hired 2 matrix officers and a plan getting officer all at the same time with this acquisition, and we really hit that strategic plan hard. This was 3 years ago, and you know what the question is they asked me today? When can we do more? We are doing so good. The ROI is so great. When can we do more? How do we do more of this? So make your case, do both your gap analysis, board and data, and then take it slow, get everyone's buy-in and present.
I heard another common thread there of the importance of partnerships, of forming those bonds and collaboration. Okay, so now we're going to stick with the insights for the nonprofit team side of the equation here. And Lisa, you mentioned scarcity as something that the board typically automatically goes to in terms of cost savings. So Matt, this is right in that vein. So in a situation where the board is heavily prioritizing fiscal responsibility, how can staff successfully affect change?
It's such a great question because boards should always be prioritizing fiscal responsibility. It is one of the very few actual duties that board members have, is to protect as fiduciaries of the organization, to protect it and to promote it. However, sometimes, as we talked about before, there's this tendency to have either a scarcity mindset or a saving mindset, which is not something that you would see them do in their own jobs or in their own careers, particularly if you have entrepreneurs on your board. They've taken huge risks, often huge personal risks, to get where they are. And now, as they are caretakers and helping this organization grow, there's this a little bit of a safety first mentality. So what can be done here? We have a saying in my house, when we're looking back at a decision, and maybe we thought we made a wrong one, we say, you know, we made the best decision we could with the information that we had at the time. And that is the responsibility of staff when it comes to the board, to define what data the board needs to see to ensure that they understand what it means. So if you are going to propose acquisition investments that are going to pay off in 3 or 4 or 5 years, you can't show up at a board meeting and start that conversation on the same day that you want to have that greenlit. You've got to lay the groundwork from the board orientation through every meeting, looking at the same metrics, reporting on the same types of activities, so that you develop this muscle memory between staff and board as to what these things mean, so that they can then use the minds that they have that have made them successful outside of the nonprofit world to say, hey, this looks like a good investment. Are you saying that if we put, you know, $10,000 or $50,000 here, that in 3 years we're going to have a 3x or a 4x return? Yes, that's what we're saying, because we've been talking to you about it for the last several months. And it gives great information and more accurate information to make those critical decisions so that the organization can grow. All I can say is that this is really where this is on staff, because your board members will not understand or bring fundraising expertise to the table. When they do, it is delightful, and you have an ally because they have been in your shoes. So if Lisa or Calvin or I serve on your boards, you're going to be great. But if you've got board members that don't have that background, it is on you to develop that shared language between them. Because of course, board members know intuitively you need money to grow and you're not going to cut your way to growth. I mean, they know this, but they lack the data to make a good decision oftentimes. And that throws them into conservation mode. Because when you don't know
Mhm.
what to do, whether it is in your personal life or in your professional life, when you don't know what to do, sometimes doing nothing is the safest way to do it, particularly when you're the one on the hook for the financial health of the organization. So find those metrics and data, educate, 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 and build that muscle memory so that the fiscal responsibility is just folded into the conversation. Of course, we're going to make this investment because we've got strong data signals that point us in that direction.
Thanks, Matt. Really good insights into the mindset of the board and like what they're prioritizing and thinking compared to what our staff and the organization leadership internally might be driving towards. So Calvin, we're going to come back to you now. We just heard from Lisa and Matt on how staff can make the case for support and affect change. On the flip side, what is your advice on how a board should evaluate if fundraising dollars are being invested wisely?
Sure. And to answer this question, I will go into a few of the technical terms, but I want to start really with governance practices because there is a qualitative approach here and a quantitative approach, and we all know that the numbers are just are just the numbers, right? So I'll start with governance best practices. I think for one, boards really should not just rely on any single one metric. We need to combine financial ratios, understand mission impact analysis, and then understand what the donor engagement trends are for a well rounded view. I think boards have to regularly request and review reports on metrics and then compare across campaigns and time periods and ask how each initiative advances both the financial health and mission fulfillment, of the organization. I think it's incumbent upon boards to both evaluate risk exposure, especially regarding donor concentration and potential impact if a major funding source disappears. And that's a major mistake that particularly smaller nonprofits will make and then find themselves in deep trouble when they lose one or two major donors that were really pushing and really supporting large parts of their programming. So seeking marking data from similar organizations and setting reasonable expectations on efficiency and effectiveness is really important. And then you've got on the technical side, you've got some things and some numbers and some quotients and ratios that absolutely should be looked at by every board and a nonprofit. One of those is the dependency quotient. I just talked about this just a little bit earlier in my comments. And that's understanding how to assess how reliant the organization is on top donors. And you calculate by dividing the sum of the five largest donor contributions by total expenditures. A lower ratio will generally signal financial resilience. If a top donor reduces support, of course, then the higher ratio is a really big red flag that boards need to really pay attention to. And then you've got the program expense ratio, and you get there by measuring what share of all expenditures is going to mission program versus admin or fundraising. Percentages of 70% or better will indicate more focus on the mission. You generally start to have to answer questions from donors if you fall below that 70% mark. But that is a basic threshold that all nonprofits need to shoot for and need to consistently meet over time. And then, of course, you've got donor metrics like monitoring acquisition cost, retention rates, the lifetime value of donors. That really balances out the short-term return with the long-term sustainability of your program. And last but not least, really focus on strategic KPI alignment. Ensure that fundraising efforts really align with organizational goals and that you can actually track them with KPIs tailored to your strategic plan and your specific impact objectives.
Thanks, Calvin. Those are some really great actionable tactics and tools that you just gave us there. So appreciate that. Um, All right, so with the evaluation framework for the board fresh in our minds from Calvin, I'm going to ask Lisa to layer on relationship considerations. So, Lisa, what are the top 3 things a development team can share or do to activate a board's confidence in trusting and approving the staff's fundraising strategies and budget recommendations?
Yeah, so thanks for this question. So first of all, I would say I'm going to go a little less technical because Calvin just gave so many technical requirements there, which were amazing. So we all need notes on that. Hopefully your AI notes capture that and can summarize it for you. I do think the biggest thing here is the relationships, right? What I would say to gain that trust, you have to listen. So I've seen so many development teams, and either depending on whether their CEO is a development person or an ops person, and with their boards kind of butt heads, right? Because we are speaking different languages, several people have said. And it's really imperative that the same way you go to a donor with curiosity, because I know you are, you're sitting in those donor meetings, you're asking them what they're passionate about, how you can connect them to the mission, how they want to be connected to the mission. Go in with that same passion for listening with your CEO and or your board members and understand where they're coming from, where they feel comfortable, what metrics they need to hear and know to feel comfortable and trust in the process. That's really the key, because if you don't have them on board, then everything else is not going to work, right? And then be really honest. So you have these metrics. So for us, as I said earlier, we laid out that plan, and it wasn't a one-year plan. Our board was used to looking at everything on an annual fiscal plan, and we said, as you heard the other 2 candidates say, this is a 3 to 5 year plan. You're not going to see the payoff in the short term. It's going to take time, but when it does, the ROI is going to be significant. And then be honest and report back along the way. It doesn't happen linearly, right? We're not going to go straight up. It looks more like this, like a squiggle across. Be like, gosh, go to them and say, gosh, we had a setback. We thought we were going to be here, but we're actually here. This is what we're going to do to get it out. And being honest and transparent, that's the way that you're going to build that trust with them, and do that without asking, right? Go to them. So that's really the main thing. The other 2 things would be, again, which you've already heard, align with the strategic plan and just get that financial alignment and the ROI, all those data that Calvin talked about in line.
Awesome. Thanks, Lisa. All right, so before we see if we had any questions that got dropped into chat in just a second, I'd like for each of you to share a wish with us. If you could make one request of a board to support the stability and growth of the fundraising program, what would it be and why? And we'll kick off with Calvin, then Lisa, and then Matt, you can wrap us up.
Phenomenal question again. And I think the single most impactful request that I would make is for 100% board giving. Every trustee contributing annually at a meaningful level. And for me, that means that every trustee is making a gift that someone who knows them and is close with them and they respect would consider generous. Okay. And I think this does a couple of things. This unified commitment really sends a powerful message to donors and funders and staff about board investment and leadership. And as previously stated, donors and grant makers often use board participation rates before making their own gifts. So achieving full board giving demonstrates to the community and the staff that the mission really matters deeply to its stewards, and it really lays the groundwork for further engagement, including networking, stewardship roles, and campaign leadership. And when trustees are all donors, it fosters a high level of accountability, credibility, and momentum. And all of these are really vital for sustained growth of the organization.
Yeah, just to go off of that, I think the board members just making the mission part of their personal brand, right? So that whatever they're talking about, someone asked them how their work week was. They're like, gosh, my work week was this. And also, I'm part of this great mission, this great charity. And again, opening those doors in so many ways. So for me, it's about them being an extension of our mission, building those relationships and help opening those doors so that we can all move the mission forward together.
So for me, it would be a strong partnership with staff in building and maintaining a culture that drives the organization forward. I think everybody may have heard the phrase, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Each of our organizations is unique, and each of our cultures are unique. But when the board is able to set that tone consistently, that means they're demonstrating generosity. That means they're showing curiosity about how the fundraising process works. It means that they're expressing confidence, as Lisa said, in making it part of their personal brand. And that starts to cascade through everything. It's about the tone at the top. And when the tone at the top is able to help trickle down, it becomes a real multiplier for your organization. Because then the things that Calvin was talking about and that Lisa were talking about, they just happen because that's what we do. This is who we are. People like us do things like this. And when you can define that culture, you are going to have an engaged board that is curious and that is motivated to push your organization forward rather than get caught in whirlpools of confusion or questioning about things that are mysterious to them.
Amazing. Thank you, Lisa, Calvin, and Matt. You all shared wonderful examples, ideas, considerations for activating boards to support stronger fundraising outcomes, making smarter investment decisions, and better understanding long-term donor value. We're a few minutes over, but we do have one question that came in for Lisa, so I will ask it because we've still got quite a few people on. So Lisa, I was experiencing some static on the line. Can you restate the resource that helped frame the conversation, RE, scarcity versus abundance mindset?
Yeah, so I think you're talking about my reference to the Dan Paletta TED Talk. So the way we think about charity is dead wrong. So again, it really talks about the difference between investing in your charity and how that helps grow the pie. We can all have a bake sale, he says, but a bake sale, we may only raise a couple $100. But if we really invest in acquisition and in our donors and major gifts, right, then we have so much more that we can move the mission forward with.
Awesome. Thank you again to our panelists and to each of you all for attending. We hope that you all have a wonderful day. And Matt, Lisa, and Calvin, thank you again for bringing your expertise today about how we can better align with our boards. We hope everybody has a wonderful week.
Thank you.